Wallace Stevens was an important modernist poet, but he was different in important ways from many of his contemporaries. Stevens is important not just for his extraordinary formal skill and facility with images, but also for the philosophies expressed in his poetry. He is known as a poet of ideas. Stevens was born in Pennsylvania in 1879. He went to Harvard, where he became friends with the philosopher, scholar, poet George Santayana, and afterwards spent some years trying to decide on a career. Eventually, he became an insurance executive, and he decided to stay one all his life. He became a poet later, and his first book was published in 1923. That Stevens was an insurance executive might seem a trivial footnote to his career as a poet, but for Stevens it was important. He didn't even give it up when he was offered a professorship at Harvard. Like his career, his poetry seeks to mix the everyday and mundane with the ecstatically imaginative. Stevens is different from his modernist contemporaries in some important ways. Many of them moved abroad and settled in cities like Paris and London, but he stayed home. They thought of themselves as poets first and foremost, but Stevens thought it was just as important to be an insurance executive. If many other modernist poets saw themselves as rejecting the romantic tradition of poets, including Wordsworth, Coleridge, Keats, and Shelley, Stevens saw himself as extending that tradition, Jahan Ramazani writes. If T.S. Eliot argued that poets must achieve an objective distance from their own poetry, for Stevens the poet's imagination is the most important thing. It does not just reflect, but reshapes reality. The imaginative and the artificial have crucial roles, then, in the way we look at the world. The title of Stevens's book, Ideas of Order, suggests as much, putting ideas before order. Once the imagination has imagined something, though, it becomes a part of reality. So, for example, a jar placed on the ground in Tennessee, mundane as it initially seems, reshapes the entire landscape and imposes a human order upon it. It's a little part of a big picture, but the simple imaginative act of placing an object reframes the entire scene and satisfies what Stevens called the human rage for order. Harmonium, Stevens's first book, and the one in which Anecdote of the Jar appears, is an extraordinary work. It features several other anecdotes that offer parables of art, imagination, and reality. It also includes poems like Sunday Morning and The Comedian as Letter C. One important idea associated with Stevens is that of the supreme fiction. If many people at the beginning of the 20th century were looking for ways to understand the universe after they had lost faith in the existence of God, Stevens thought the mixture of reality and imagination in poetry might offer a way to encounter a newly secularized world. Even as he took these philosophies seriously, however, Stevens also had a keen eye for the joy and the escape that poetry can bring. One of my favorite Stevens poems, Gubbinal, emphasizes the ways that acts of the imagination can invigorate a world that might seem bleak or depressing or ugly. Here's the poem. Gubbinal. That strange flower, the sun, is just what you say. Have it your way. The world is ugly and the people are sad. That tuft of jungle feathers, that animal eye, is just what you say. That savage of fire, that seed, have it your way. The world is ugly and the people are sad. Let's start with the title. The Oxford English Dictionary defines gubbins as a fool, a duffer. This poem will somehow involve stupidity or foolishness. A gubbinal might either be the song of a gubbins or a fool, or a song for or to a gubbins. Whether the gubbins is speaking or being spoken to will become clearer later in the poem. The poem begins with an image, that strange flower. We'll eventually find out what this metaphor represents, but the metaphor comes before that object. That almost sounds like the speaker is pointing at something. The something is a flower, but it's a strange one. That is, a conventional poetic image, but one that is vaguely different. The strange flower is the sun. Isn't the sun, the source of all light and all life, pretty remarkable in its own right? Does it really need a poet's metaphors to give it life? The poem seems to suggest that it might, that even natural phenomena, as glorious as the sun, don't mean much if we can't find beauty in them. The central proposition around which the poem revolves is, the world is ugly and the people are sad. Is this what the poem is trying to say? There's no question that parts of the world and aspects of life are ugly. But would an ugly world be imbued with the potential for images like strange flower and tuft of jungle feathers? And are the people sad? There are sad people out there, to be sure, but not all of them are. Here, then, we have a crucial question for interpreting the poem. Are people sad, or are they happy? And if they're happy, why does the poem tell us twice that they're sad? Here, it might be useful to think about the distance that you and your give in the poem. These words make clear that there are two different kinds of opinions running through the poem, those of the speaker and those of the you. When the speaker says, "have it your way," he seems to implicitly say, "and I'll have it mine." The rhyme on say and way seems to have an important effect on the sound of the poem. It's a pretty simple rhyme that makes "have it your way" feel like a reluctant add-on, more as if the speaker is appeasing a bratty child than that he is validating the opinion of the you. And in the poem's collection of metaphors, the speaker offers an implicit rebuke to having it your way. Strange flower isn't enough to represent the sun. He also needs jungle feathers, animal eye, savage of fire, and the fecund image of a seed. The proliferation of exciting images contrasts with the simple defeatism of the world is ugly and the people are sad. So the poem humors the ideas of Gubbinses, those who would think the world is ugly and the people are sad, in order to reject them. To Stevens, the world is not ugly and the people need not be sad, but one surefire way a Gubbins can make herself sad is to miss the extraordinary possibilities presented by the imagination.